When a teacher clings to just follow the textbook, a routine electronics lab erupts into the most unforgettable lesson of the year. Hello and welcome back to Karma Stories. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we're riding a roller coaster of bad calls and instant payback. Think penny pinching bosses who set themselves on fire, figuratively and maybe almost literally, and rule happy know-it-alls who get tripped up by their own policies. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Deep Rocks. No problems, just look in your textbook. About 15 years ago, I was almost 20 and in my country's equivalent of a trade school for electricians. One of our teachers, electronic circuits class, had a kind of annoying catchphrase for every question students had. No problems, just look in your textbook. He had already mentally checked out since he got a way better job lined up for next semester. So he pretty much only read stuff from the textbook and then switched to the textbook's practical exercises, where we had a breadboard and, working in pairs, inserted resistors, capacitors, and other components in it. All in all, not the worst teacher we had, but this one incident made his class very memorable. On the third class we had with that teacher, first one was introduction, second one was how to read resistor color codes. He said his catchphrase no less than 5 times per class. My friend showed me a glaring mistake in the textbook's practical exercise. It was something very simple, placing 3 resistors in series, measuring the current produced with a 24-volt DC power supply, and comparing to the values we had calculated. The first 2 exercises were okay, but in the third one, the values for all resistors were way too low. Like 3 orders of magnitude low. Somebody meant to write 10 kiloohms, but typed 10 ohms instead, for every single resistor in that exercise. For people who are not very familiar with electronics, Ohm's law dictates that, for a constant voltage supply, current gets higher as resistance gets lower. Voltage equals resistance times current, or V equals RXL, which can be written as I equals V over R. Joule's law dictates that more power, which in a resistor's case would be dissipated as heat, is supplied, the higher is the current. Power equals resistance times current squared, or P equals RXL squared. Resistors have a power rating measured in watts, and when the rating is exceeded, they start to produce smoke and or fire. The power rating for the resistors we were using was 0.25 watts. When resistors are placed in series, their total value is added. In this example, 3 10-ohm resistors would have a total resistance of 30 ohms. If we use the previous formulas, we get a value of 0.8 amps for current and 19.2 watts for power, or almost 77 times the power rating of the resistors. If the 10 kiloohm resistors were used, we'd have a 0.8 milliamp for current and 19.2 milliwatts for power, well within the power rating of the resistors. My friend, I, and a few other students tried to ask the teacher if those values were correct, and his answer to no one's surprise was, no problems, just look in your textbook. I tried to argue that the textbook was plain wrong, and he shut me down, saying how way smarter people than him and I wrote the textbook, so we should just follow it. So everyone, some more reluctantly than others, placed the resistors on the breadboard, connected the power supply, and waited for his instruction to turn it on, as has been for the first 2 exercises without incident. Then he said to turn on the power supply, without even looking in the textbook. At first, everything seemed fine, and some people started to get their multimeters. A few seconds later, a girl screamed, "Fire!" but it was really only smoke. A few seconds later, and we now had small fires all over the lab, and people freaking out. Nothing spectacular, and they died down a few seconds later, but enough to make most of the 30 people scream and panic, while the smelt of burnt plastic from 15 breadboards and burnt ceramic from 45 resistors made the air pretty much unbreathable. To his credit, the teacher engaged the lab circuit breaker pretty fast and evacuated the room so no one breathed potentially toxic fumes. Since I was expecting it, I was more annoyed than scared, unlike some of the more sensitive people who were crying, and told the teacher, who was looking at the empty lab as if he was seeing ghosts, "There seems to be a problem. Should you look in the textbook now?" He gave a nervous laughter and said, "Maybe you're smarter than the people who wrote it." The screaming attracted a more experienced teacher who, after making sure everyone was okay, just couldn't stop laughing at our teacher. He did keep using his catchphrase, "No problems, just look in your textbook," until the end of the semester. But he was now also looking in the textbook himself and spotted a few glaring mistakes made by those intelligent people. For some reason, he didn't seem to like the nickname we gave him when we heard someone saying it in the hallway. Next is Textbook Idiots Class. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Illuminatus Prime. It says, "When I got to the part that said he had already mentally checked out since he got a way better job lined up, I had a hunch this was going to be another classic Malicious Compliance. And I was right. You followed the teacher's instructions to follow the book instructions, knowing the results would range from a quiet fail, at least, to a flaming disaster at most, and you were right. I'm glad no one was physically injured, but why did no one pull the fire alarm? That would have really topped off the day." OP responded and said, "Small-scale fires that died down quickly. Look for resistor burning videos on YouTube if you're curious. People were more startled than anything, but it did cause quite the commotion. Fire alarm was a few meters down the hallway, if I remember correctly. Come to think about it, that building was not very safe." So are we saying that this story was a textbook example of malicious compliance? I do have to admit though, hearing that this professor actually does look at the textbook now, after this big old snafu, well, that's a nice thing to hear because a lot of times they don't learn from their mistakes and just keep doing things the way they've always done. Especially one like this who has already checked out, as they said, because they're leaving for a better job later, and this one just doesn't matter, which means the students don't matter too. And that is kinda sad. When a penny-pinching boss demands the kitchen save every last drop of tomato sauce, his brilliant cost-cutting trick ends up adding a very unexpected ingredient to the recipe. This story comes to us from William26. Stop wasting ingredients. Years ago, I worked as a laborer in a food production company. Kind of a mom and pop size production distribution facility. We made all types of food and sauces. One of the more mundane steps to a particular sauce was opening and emptying large cans of tomato sauce into a large mixer. Pretty simple, just open, pour, and toss the can. One of the higher-ups decided we were wasting a lot of the sauce by not thoroughly cleaning out each can. We're talking probably 20 to 30 ounces of tomato sauce per batch, which was probably around 2 to 3% waste. I get it, every cent counts. The problem was, the solution they came up with was to use these rubber spatulas to clean out the extra sauce from these metal cans. It didn't take a scientist to see that this would not work out well with the cans being sharp and cutting into the rubber, leading to rubber going into the sauce. I tried voicing concerns, but was shut down. I assumed they just thought we were lazy and didn't want the extra work. So we do as we are told and start cleaning the cans thoroughly. Sure enough, about 10 cans in, we notice our spatulas missing large chunks of rubber. I hand one of the spatulas to my supervisor and he takes it to his boss. On cue, he comes back about 2 minutes later and says, "Don't worry about scooping out the cans anymore." That was my first taste of maybe being a manager doesn't mean you have all the answers. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Avid Learner. It says, "That feeling when you realize someone in authority is completely oblivious to basic operational realities, and you're just left to watch the inevitable happen. Like, really. It's incredible how some people just don't grasp fundamental things." OP responded and said, or they can get so hyper-focused on a brilliant idea that they had and can't or won't accept criticism. Is it creepy to anyone else here that OP didn't say they had to completely throw out the batch of food that they made with those spatulas? Because there's rubber bits in there, and I bet you that doesn't meet whatever food code they're supposed to be following. It really is concerning. A freshly expanded hospital wing meets a cocky manager who swears they need no extra staff, and his bold promise is about to boomerang hard. This story comes to us from Milled Oats. "I stake my reputation on the fact we don't need any extra staff." Years ago, I was a union delegate for a hospital that underwent expansion. More services, more beds, an extra operating theater, etc. Before the expansion opened, the usual fight between the unions and management started over staffing. We went in really well prepared and management took it well, offering staffing we wanted. We had a final meeting with about 40 people in the room. HR, department heads, and the various unions. We get to a department I will call ABC, and the department head says, we don't need any extra staff except for nurses. I argued, you have more space and more beds, and you need more cleaners, wardsmen, admin staff, etc. He fires back, I stake my reputation on it that we don't need any extra staff. I ask the minutes record this specifically. A meeting is set down for 4 weeks after the hospital expansion opening. We let him have his way, knowing he wouldn't be successful. Guess whose department turned into a complete farce? Nothing terrible, just lots of little issues. At the next union meeting, again, with all people previously present, I read out the list of issues Department ABC has. I then read out the last minutes with him stating they didn't need any extra staffing, and that the department head had staked his reputation on it. I then asked the head of ABC to justify all of this. He couldn't. I asked him, as he staked his reputation on this and the outcomes have been poor, what does that mean? He gave no answer. I looked towards the CEO and said, you were here last time and the buck stops with you. He agreed to review the situation urgently. The union placed the hospital into formal industrial dispute at the meeting over the lack of staffing in Department ABC. The next day, the CEO sends out an email stating after a brief conversation with the head of Department ABC, he has chosen to seek different career opportunities. This is another case of a worker getting an instruction from somebody higher up and then asking them to make sure that it was written down. That person higher up should be looking at what they said and really wondering why they wanted it in writing. But I guess our managers don't really think that way, do they? Another thing on this one, I love the corporate jargon of they chose to seek different career opportunities. But I think my favorite one was they were given the opportunity to seek employment elsewhere. When an 18-year-old referee invents a show up 30 minutes early rule to squeeze his younger assistant, he's about to learn the whistle can blow both ways. This story comes to us from Obvious Secretary 151. Show up 30 minutes early? Sure, Dave, as long as you do too. I am 15 years old and work as a soccer referee. I will normally arrive 10 to 15 minutes early to a game, which is plenty of time to check in players from both teams and make sure the field is in proper playing condition. One game I showed up to as an assistant referee, my center ref, 18 years old, let's call him Dave, told me that all refs have to arrive 30 minutes early to every game. I know this is not true, and stayed silent. We refed the game as usual and returned to where we put our stuff at the end of the game. Dave told me that because I didn't arrive 30 minutes early, he would mark that I didn't show up, basically telling me that I wouldn't get paid for the game we just worked. I complained that this was a rule that he made up. He left the game without saying anything else, figuring that would be all. Note, if you referee without any assistant referees, you get paid like $5 more. I think this was Dave's plan. When I got home, I made sure to sign up to be center referee at every game where Dave was an assistant referee. Poor Dave showed up to his next game 15 minutes early, which is absolutely unacceptable. I said nothing the whole game, but only marked him absent, which means he wouldn't get paid. This went on for a week and a half until his paycheck came in, and he was about $120 off of what his total should have been. I did make sure every game that Dave was less than 30 minutes early. Dave emails one of the main referees who runs everything to see what the problem was. One of the main referees, let's call him John, told Dave that he wasn't there, so he wouldn't get paid. Dave put 2 and 2 together and realized what I did. Emails were sent between Dave, John, and I until John had the full story. Dave was fired for making up rules, and I got paid for the first game with Dave. Don't take advantage of young people. Take that, Dave. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called NoLeopard556. It says, I love it when a rules for thee but not for me kind of person gets bit in the butt like this. Another commenter down below called Deep Depth 6 said, what kind of effed up system allows you to take away pay from someone else without any proof? Dave is a scumbag, but the problem was definitely avoidable. OP, at 15 years old, having the balls to take on the older referee is absolutely amazing, and skills like that will help you out as you get older. Now, I know the person in this story was named Dave and not Rick, but I really do feel like we need to put something in here, like maybe a screw you, Dave. Told to haul gear up a crumbling stone staircase and later mocked for being fussy about the rain, one church groundskeeper flips the rulebook and leaves management out in the cold. This story comes to us from Dev Legion. Break health and safety? No problem. And we don't work in the rain? Excellent. This is a two-parter. My initial malicious compliance probably contributed to the cause of the second, and it all happened roughly 2 years ago. I used to work for the local church as a groundskeeper and other odd duties. One of the odd duties was going upstairs to brush and vacuum the open floor. It wasn't an odious job, but getting up the very old, worn, and uneven stone stairs was a pain with a vacuum, brush, bucket, etc. One of the first times it happened, I noticed several of the brackets that held the thick rope handrail were either loose or came out completely if you weren't careful. I reported this and was told the parish council had known about it for 3 years. I kinda got annoyed about it at this point because if it came out when you had the vacuum on your back, it had a rucksack harness, and you slipped, it's a heck of a fall backwards. Not to mention the thousands of tourists that used to go up those steps, it could lead to serious injury. I also said that I was marking the date and any injury caused by the stairs, I'd immediately advise H&S. I said to my immediate boss that I wouldn't be going up them until the issue was fixed. She seemed a bit shocked, but said she'd say something at the meeting. True to my word, when asked to go clean, I refused. Weirdly, the issue was fixed within a month or so. Roll on a few months and I was called into a meeting with the parish council's employee contact. Long story short, in the first, I was told my job was secure. I was asked to come in for a second meeting a month later. Agreed at the time of the first meeting, and was told I was being laid off at the end of the year. This was August. I did win a discrimination case against them, but that's a different story and not malicious compliance. There's been an ongoing joke about the parish council saying we didn't have to work in the rain. I'd been asking for general work and rain gear since I started working there the previous year, but wasn't too bothered because I had plenty of old work clothes from previous jobs. After the employee contract informed me that I was being laid off and was unemployable, and a year of asking for rain gear, I'd had enough. So every time it even drizzled, I went inside. If it stopped, I came out. Thankfully, my colleagues were fine with this. They knew the score. As it was coming towards autumn, I did less and less work. I just sat with my feet up. This carried on until the end of October, where I just booked the rest of the year as a holiday. Additional info, I was on a disabled work scheme via the government, so it was documented what I was and wasn't capable of. This also was adhered to even more strictly than before, and if any job even looked like it might fall under the umbrella of the if he thinks it's too much, he can say no rule. All in all, I helped my colleagues as much as needed, but my workload dropped massively as I started to go inside to avoid the rain and refused to do the jobs I didn't necessarily have to do. OP added a couple edits down at the bottom. The first one says, by making sure my immediate supervisor brought up the issue with me refusing to work until the stairs were fixed in a council meeting, it made sure the problem was recorded in the meeting minutes, so proved it was a known problem. The second edit says, because rain gear wasn't provided with the necessary protective clothing, I was not legally required to work in any weather but dry. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Sidgwin. It says, I'm assuming from the wording in some paragraphs this was in the UK. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry and let me know. Just because you Brits are not as likely to sue as us Americans doesn't mean it won't happen. 1 or 2 injured tourists could be devastating. Opie responded and said, "I'm British, but I live and work in the EU. We actually do get a fair few Americans visiting the church, up to 2 or 3 coachloads a week at peak. The UK is getting as bad as the US for suing. I know of one case where a 40-year-old woman returning to work after the kids grew up sued the sandwich chain she got a job at because she sliced her hand open on a bread knife. The reason behind the case was nobody told her the knife was sharp. The barrister I was talking to, who defended the chain, and me had a right laugh over that one." I agree with OP on this one. If something isn't safe and you know it's not safe, and people are telling you to do it anyway, yeah, you just refuse, because there's no point in you carrying something up those stairs, having the handrail fail on you, and getting injured while you fall all the way back down. Especially since they were stone stairs inside a church, and that would definitely hurt. If you enjoyed today's episode, I encourage you to follow us on your favorite podcasting platform. And if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and please drop a like on the video. It tells YouTube that we're doing a good job. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.